I'm joined in the studio by David Cretney MLC. I'm speaking to you with two hats on now because you're chair of the Social Affairs Policy Review Committee, also as leader of the Manx Labour Party. Now, it would be remiss of me not to ask you about this report, really, given the way that the timings worked. The MLP also discussed mental health issues at length at a recent policy meeting. You spoke before the break in support of the Health Minister, broadly speaking. Is there anything you disagree with there?
Just back to what you just said, the Manx Labour Party is in the preparation of a policy review. We are looking at individual policy areas, and mental health seemed to us to be one which we could rightly invite the public to join us. We had a really good turnout. There were trade union officials. There were people from the third sector. There were people who work in the sector. There were service users and those who were associated with charities. It was a very good meeting. And so it's something which is close to the heart of the Manx Labour Party. Health, full stop. But mental health in this, it's quite apparent that mental health is a matter which is long overdue. Better support and funding. And so, yes, I continue to support the Minister. The Minister, when in that interview, was very straight that he was unhappy about what had come out and that he was going to act upon it from day one. I welcome that. As I say, in the past, and he will now have to oversee that the actions, the 17 recommendations, are properly followed up, and I trust him to do that. It may well be something that the Social Affairs Policy Review Committee will wish to talk to him about, or it may well be something that will come up in Tynwald. However, it is important, and I welcome his commitment to work on it, as he said, from day one. One of the things he didn't mention in that clip, and I know it was part of a longer interview that he did with Sean Cooper, was in relation to patients appear to have limited access to independent advocates, and that needs urgently addressing. Now, this is in the law, the 1998 Mental Health Act. This is a requirement of the law, and for them not to have that is worrying, to say the least. And so that would be one of the issues that would jump off the page to me. Also, as I say, about physical and mental health and the care plans which the Minister spoke about at length. He is taking it seriously. Those around him appear to be taking it seriously at last. And so we can raise issues, but ultimately it's for the government and it's for the Department of Health and Social Care to make sure that action is taken. And I trust that he will do that.
We'll come back to some of those issues you've mentioned shortly. I went to the launch of Manannan Court and I reported on it a little bit, sort of since its official opening, if you like. One thing I was going to want to raise with you is to do with the staff-patient ratios, which is another point which is highlighted by yourself. I think for a while the facility was largely operated by agency staff. Are the staffing levels still a concern, do you think?
Well, it was highlighted in a report that if people had to have intensive observation, then the staffing levels that are currently in place are insufficient, and the recommendation was that would need to be improved upon. The Minister has said that each of the recommendations will be taken seriously. That's one of the ones that we think is pretty important.
I obviously have no professional knowledge of any of these topics or anything like that, but I would assume that in an acute inpatient facility, perhaps those ratios might be different to other organisations in healthcare.
Yes, I'm sure.
Is that a fair summary, do you think?
Yes, I'm sure that's the case. If people are at risk, although, Manannan Court, following on from lessons learned in inverted commas in other establishments where people have taken their own lives in establishments owned by the state, is built with that in mind. So hopefully, those kind of issues will have been taken out of the scenario now. But when people are under duress, then it's important that the appropriate staffing levels are there in order to support them.
Have you been to the facility?
I have been to the facility, yes. I didn't go to the opening, but I have been since.
And you will obviously have been familiar with its predecessor.
Yes. One of the things that was said to me was, and I perhaps need to check up with the Minister on this, is that I'm told that there are less beds now than there were previously. Angela Murray did, in her presentation to us, talk about alternatives that were being brought forward. So I'm not completely up to date there, but you would think that given that mental health issues are more dominant now than perhaps in the past, in the past it appears that sometimes people were put away and you didn't hear about them, and society just got on with it. Well, that was the wrong thing, and hopefully we've learned from all those kind of things in the past, and hopefully now we treat people with a bit more respect and dignity than might have been the case a long, long time ago.
Integrated care, again, to my simplistic understanding, is an increased emphasis on treatment in the home environment, yes, or in the community, perhaps I should say.
Yeah.
So how does that fit with an acute facility?
Again, well, some people will be able to be helped and supported in their own homes, and I think that's very good. Again, I think it's very important wherever possible that people are supported. This applies to older people as well. And again, I think there's a tsunami coming on the way in terms of Alzheimer's and other disease things like that. With more people living longer, there's going to be more instances of those kind of issues. That's why I try to encourage the government to support the establishment of a champion for older people. They chose not to do that, and that's history now. But I certainly support people being supported in their own homes. The mistake we must learn, though, is in the 1980s, people in the UK, and we followed the UK, had a policy of ordinary people in ordinary streets. So people with mental health issues were supported in the community. In the UK, in particular, I think that was felt by those who were promoting it to save money. And that, what I would say is that proper support in the community might not necessarily save money, but it's entirely the right thing to do.
You mentioned a bit about the ageing population, and again, I haven't got the exact figure written down, but I remember there was a prediction that there'll be 20 new care homes or
yes,
thereabouts needed on the Isle of Man in the not too distant future. I'm not for a second likening residential care to Manannan Court, but is there going to be, do you think, an increased reliance on infrastructure to accommodate people who require assistance?
Yes. Well, again, I'm involved with families at the moment who the care that their older relations are receiving hasn't been as good as it could have been, and I'll put it no stronger than that. And yes, I think it was the present Chief Minister who indicated the number of homes that may be required for older people into the future. And again, it's very important that we get all the statistics right, but it is apparent that with people living longer, it's inevitable that illnesses and conditions of older age will be more prevalent, and as such, you need to make proper provision for that.
Aren't there already shortages in nursing, for example?
In staff nursing, or
yes, it's in
staff.
Staff
Well, one of the good things is that nurse training has been reintroduced on the island. I'm told though that mental health nurse training isn't available on the island at the moment, and I'd like to perhaps talk to the Minister as to, is that something that may be possible, so that people from the island who are interested in this and have the commitment may be able to follow that as a career, because we're obviously going to need vital staff, the people
to grow our own.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
Let's come back to some of the points that you've raised about this report into Manannan Court. The limited access to independent advocates. Is that a problem which is specific to the facility, do you think, or is that wider in the health service? Is there any indication?
Well, it's the first time that I've read that, and it's specific to the mental health facility, in as much as it comes under the 1998 Mental Health Act. It's a provision of the 1998 Mental Health Act. It's something that is in line with European courts of human rights. We also made a recommendation in our January 2019 report about mental health capacity legislation. Now, again, the Minister and Tynwald took that on. We haven't seen it yet, but that's another important area which needs to be put in place.
I don't know exactly when Manannan Court was officially opened, but I know that I've been here about 2 years, so we can safely say it wasn't very long ago.
No.
How much of this can we put down to being like teething issues, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't be as generous as that. I mean, you have teething issues with parts of the building or whatever. These issues that have been brought up are more cultural and are more concerning than that, really. And I think that's why the Minister, first of all, engaged the report. It was him who felt it was the right thing to do, to have a report instigated. And now, immediately, he's published it. And as such, he's also made it clear that it's going to be acted upon from day one. So I think he realises, and any of us who are concerned about this, realise that these are important areas that need to be acted upon.
One thing that you've spoken about already this afternoon, and I think the Health Minister referred to in his interview with Sian, was about the communication channels. And I would guess anyway that that's certainly not just applicable to Manannan Court. That's also not a change which I envisage is going to be introduced overnight, is it?
Well, they're doing the test scheme in Peel at the moment, in the Peel in the West at the moment, and in terms of working in the community, and that requires each of the agencies involved to be properly joined up to act together. It doesn't require 17 different people to speak, as Angela Murray stated, 17 different people to speak to people. It's much more coordinated, it's much more effective, it's a much better way of doing things. And yes, you would be dishonest if you felt that was going to get done overnight. But all I'm saying in all of this, and I know the Minister agrees, is that these issues are priority and need action.